What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actors sits down for what should be a simple chat about his latest film, and instead finds himself facing a barrage of personal attacks on live television? In just 42 seconds of biting commentary, what started as a friendly promotional appearance transformed into the most explosive walkout in daytime television history. This is the moment everything went wrong. The studio lights were bright that afternoon as Hugh Grant settled into the iconic purple chair opposite the Loose Women panel. Denise Welch sat front and center, her presence commanding as always. To her left sat Nadia Sawalha, warm and bubbly. To her right, Kay Adams, the consummate professional, and Jane Moore, notebook in hand. The studio audience applauded warmly as Grant smiled and gave a little wave. He looked relaxed, dressed in a dark suit with an open collar shirt, his signature charm already working its magic on the crowd. "Hugh, welcome to Loose Women," Denise began, her smile wide but something sharp flickering in her eyes. "We are absolutely thrilled to have you here with us today." "Thank you for having me," Grant replied, his voice pleasant and measured. That familiar English accent putting the audience at ease. "It is lovely to be here. I have watched the show many times." "Have you really?" Denise asked, eyebrows raised. "I am surprised you have time for daytime television with your busy schedule." Grant laughed easily. "Oh, one always finds time for good television," the audience chuckled. Nadia Sawalha leaned in with enthusiasm. "Hugh, we want to hear all about your new film. It looks absolutely wonderful from the trailer." "Well, thank you." "Nadia," Grant said, his face lighting up. "Yes, it is a romantic comedy, which I know people will say is very typical for me, but this one is different. It is set in the Cotswolds, and the story is really about second chances and finding love later in life." Kay Adams nodded encouragingly. "What drew you to this particular script?" "The writing, honestly," Grant said. "The dialogue is sharp, funny, but also quite moving in places. And I loved the character. He is flawed, very human. Not just the bumbling charmer I have played so many times before." Jane Moore smiled. "So you are aware of being typecast, then?" "Oh, absolutely," Grant said with a self-deprecating grin. "I have made a career out of playing variations of the same person. But this felt different. This felt like growth." "Tell us about your co-star," Nadia said. "She is relatively unknown, is she not?" "She is wonderful," Grant enthused. "Fresh, talented, brought something really special to the role. Working with someone new, someone hungry, it energizes you as an actor." The conversation flowed naturally. Grant described filming in the English countryside, talked about a scene where it rained for 7 hours straight, and they just kept filming. The audience laughed as he described trying to deliver romantic lines while soaking wet and freezing. Kay asked about the director, and Grant spoke glowingly about their collaborative process. Then, about 8 minutes into the interview, Denise shifted in her seat. The movement was subtle, but Grant noticed it. So did the other panelists. "This all sounds lovely, Hugh," Denise said, her tone changing ever so slightly. "But let us talk about your personal life for a moment, shall we?" Grant's smile flickered, just a fraction. "Well, I am not sure there is much to say, really. I prefer to keep my private life quite private." "Oh, come on now," Denise pressed, leaning forward. "You are a public figure, Hugh. Surely you understand that people are curious about your relationships, your romantic life." "Curious is one thing," Grant responded, his voice still pleasant, but becoming more careful. "But I think there is a line, is there not, between professional interest and prying into private matters." Kay Adams jumped in quickly. "Hugh makes a fair point, Denise. We should respect those boundaries." "Hugh, back to the film. Was there a particular scene that was challenging to shoot?" But Denise was not letting go. "Boundaries? Really, Kay? This is Hugh Grant we are talking about. The man who has made millions. literally millions of pounds, playing the romantic lead in film after film. He has built his entire career on people being invested in his love life. And now, he wants to lecture us about boundaries? The audience went noticeably quieter. Grant sat up a bit straighter, his relaxed posture shifting. I am not lecturing anyone, Denise. I am simply saying that my personal relationships are not up for public discussion. My work is public. My private life is private. But they are, though, are they not? Denise continued, her voice taking on an edge. Your relationships have been public. When you date famous people, when you make choices that end up splashed across every tabloid in the country, you lose the right to privacy. That is the deal you made. I never made any such deal, Grant replied, his voice still calm but now unmistakably firm. Being an actor does not mean I forfeit my basic human dignity or my right to keep certain aspects of my life private. I act in films. That is my job. What I do in my personal time is nobody's business but my own. Nadia Sawalha tried to intervene, her voice bright and cheerful. You know what? Maybe we should move on to talk about the film again. Hugh, I read that there is a wonderful scene with a dog in the film. Can you tell us about that? Denise shot Nadia a sharp look. No. Actually, I think this is an important conversation to have. Hugh, you have had a very, very public romantic history. You have dated some of the most famous women in the world. You cannot possibly expect to just pick and choose when the public gets to know about your life. Grant leaned back in his chair, his jaw visibly tight. Actually, Denise, I absolutely can expect that. I chose to be an actor, to tell stories on screen, to entertain people. I did not choose to surrender every private moment of my existence for public consumption. Those are two very different things. That sounds quite precious to me, Denise said, her tone now openly sarcastic. You want all the fame, all the fortune, all the adulation, but none of the scrutiny that comes with it. You want to have your cake and eat it too. I want to do my job and be left alone when I am not working, Grant said, his voice still controlled, but the frustration bleeding through. I want to go to the grocery store without being photographed. I want to have a private conversation without seeing it in the papers the next day. None of that seems unreasonable to me. Jane Moore finally spoke up, setting down her notebook. Denise, I think you are being a bit harsh here. Hugh is our guest. He came here to talk about his film. A guest who is being evasive, Denise shot back. I am just trying to have an honest, frank conversation. Is that not what we pride ourselves on here at Loose Women? Honest conversations? Honest, yes, Jane replied, but also respectful. Respectful? Denise scoffed. I am being perfectly respectful. I am asking questions that millions of people want answers to, Grant interjected, his voice sharp now. There is nothing honest or respectful about ambushing someone with invasive questions about their personal life when they came here specifically to discuss their work, Denise. That is not journalism. That is not even good television. That is just rude. The tension in the studio was thick enough to cut. The audience sat in complete silence, all eyes darting between Hugh and Denise. Kay Adams looked deeply uncomfortable, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Nadia Sawalha bit her lip, clearly wishing she could disappear. But Denise was on a roll now, seemingly energized by the confrontation. Let me ask you something, Hugh. Do you think you are better than us? Is that it? You waltz in here with your posh accent, your Hollywood credentials, your fancy film career, and you think you can just dictate what we talk about? Tell us what questions are acceptable and which are not. Grant stared at her for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was ice cold. I do not think I am better than anyone, Denise. But I do think I deserve basic respect. I think any guest on any program deserves basic respect, and you, quite clearly, have no interest in providing that. Oh, please, Denise said with a harsh laugh. Do not play the victim here, Hugh. You are a multimillionaire actor with houses all over the world. You can handle a few tough questions. Tough questions about my work, Grant said, his voice rising slightly for the first time. Absolutely. I can handle those. I welcome those. Ask me about my acting process. Ask me about the challenges of the role. Ask me why I chose this project. Those are tough questions. But what you are doing, this relentless prying into my personal life, this is not journalism, Denise. This is gossip. This is tabloid nonsense, dressed up as serious conversation. How dare you, Denise said, sitting up straighter. How dare you come on this show and insult what we do here? I am not insulting the show, Grant said, his voice firm. I am insulting your behavior. There is a difference. Kay, Nadia, Jane, they have all been perfectly professional. They have asked interesting questions about the film. But you, Denise, you have done nothing but attack me since the moment you brought up my personal life. Nadia looked like she wanted to sink into her chair. Jane Moore nodded slightly, agreeing with Grant, but clearly not wanting to escalate things further. Kay Adams tried once more to intervene. Why do we not all just take a moment to reset? We can come back to the film, talk about something else. No, Denise said sharply. We are not resetting anything. Hugh Grant came on this show, and he is going to answer the questions I want to ask. That is not how this works, Grant said, his voice tight with anger now. I am not obligated to answer anything just because you demand it. You do not own me. You do not control me. I am a guest, Denise. A guest. And guests are supposed to be treated with courtesy and respect, not badgered and insulted. Kay Adams put her hand on Denise's arm, her voice pleading. Denise, maybe we should take a breath here. Step back. This has gotten out of hand. Denise shook her off roughly. No, Kay, I am tired of this. I am tired of celebrities coming on this show and expecting us to just fawn all over them, toss them softball questions, but treat them like they are made of glass. Hugh Grant wants to come here and promote his film. Fine. Wonderful. But he does not get to control the entire conversation. He does not get to decide what is off limits. I am not trying to control anything, Grant said, his voice now fully raised, the anger clear. I am trying to maintain a shred of dignity, which you seem absolutely determined to strip away from me for the sake of what? Ratings? Drama? Making yourself look important? Making yourself feel powerful by tearing down someone who came here in good faith? Dignity? Denise laughed, and it was a harsh, ugly sound. You want to talk about dignity? You lost your dignity years ago with the choices you made, Hugh. Years ago. So do not come crying to me about it now. The audience gasped audibly. Several people put their hands to their mouths. Nadia Sawalha's face went pale. Jane Moore shook her head slowly, her expression one of complete disbelief. Even Kay Adams looked genuinely shocked at how far Denise had pushed things. Hugh Grant stood up slowly, deliberately. His face was flushed with anger, but his movements were controlled, measured. That, he said quietly, his voice steady despite the fury in his eyes, is completely out of order. Sit down, Hugh, Denise said dismissively, waving her hand at him. We are not finished here. Oh, we are very much finished, Grant replied. We were finished the moment you decided to turn this into a personal attack rather than a professional interview. I came here in good faith, Denise. I came here to talk about my film, to have a pleasant conversation, to connect with your viewers. Instead, you have spent the last several minutes attacking my character, prying into my private life, and insulting me in the most offensive way possible. I was just asking questions, Denise said, though her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. No, Grant said firmly, pointing his finger at her. You were not asking questions. You were being deliberately cruel. There is a massive difference between journalism, between honest inquiry, and bullying. And what you have been doing here today is bullying. Plain and simple. Jane Moore stood up quickly. Hugh, I am so sorry. On behalf of the panel, I apologize. This is not how we normally conduct interviews. This is not what Loose Women is supposed to be about." "I appreciate that, Jane," Grant said, his voice softening slightly as he looked at her. "I truly do. But I think it is best if I leave now. I do not think there is any coming back from this." "You cannot just walk off," Denise said, her voice sharp again, regaining some of its earlier edge. "You are in the middle of an interview. We have a show to do. We have an audience here, viewers at home." Grant turned to look at her directly, his expression a mixture of anger and something that almost looked like pity. "Watch me," he said simply, quietly. He reached down and began to unclip his microphone, his fingers working at the small black device attached to his lapel. Nadia Sawala stood up quickly, her voice almost breaking. "Hugh, please. Please do not go. We can start over. We can talk about the film properly. Forget all this. Just please do not leave." "Nadia, you are very kind," Grant said, his voice softer now, gentler. "You have been nothing but lovely. But I cannot stay. I will not sit here and be disrespected like this. I have been in this industry for over 30 years. I have done hundreds, maybe thousands of interviews in that time. Never, not once, have I been treated with such contempt by a host. Never have I felt so unwelcome, so attacked." "Oh, do not be so dramatic," Denise snapped. "You are acting like I murdered your family or something. I asked you some personal questions. That is what we do here. Get over yourself." "You insulted me," Grant said, turning back to face her, his voice quiet but filled with barely controlled rage. "Repeatedly, deliberately. And you seem to think you are entitled to do so simply because I am an actor, because I am famous. Well, let me tell you something, Denise. I am also a human being. I have feelings. I have dignity. And I absolutely will not, be spoken to like that by anyone. I do not care who you are, or what platform you have." Kay Adams was standing now, too, her hands raised in a placating gesture. "Hugh, on behalf of the show, on behalf of all of us, I apologize. This got completely out of hand. You did not deserve this treatment." Grant handed his microphone to a crew member who had approached nervously, clearly unsure whether to intervene or stay back. "Thank you, Kay. I genuinely appreciate that. But my decision is made. I am leaving." The audience was completely silent now. Not a single sound. Everyone watching the scene unfold with a mixture of shock, fascination, and discomfort. Some of the audience members looked sympathetic to Grant, their faces showing clear support. Others simply looked stunned at what was happening in front of them. Denise stood up now, crossing her arms over her chest. "Fine then. Walk off. Run away. That is what you people do when things get uncomfortable, is it not? When someone actually challenges you, when someone actually asks you a real question instead of lobbing softballs, you run." Grant paused at the very edge of the set, right where the bright lights gave way to darkness. He turned back one more time. "No, Denise, that is not what I am doing. What I am doing is refusing to participate in your attempt to humiliate me for ratings, for drama, for whatever sick pleasure you are getting from this. There is a word for that. It is called self-respect." "Self-respect," Denise repeated mockingly, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "That is absolutely rich coming from you. You, of all people, want to talk to me about self-respect." Jane Moore stepped forward, putting herself physically between Denise and Hugh. "Denise, stop. Just stop right now. You have said enough. More than enough." But Grant had already heard more than he could stomach. "I genuinely hope you are proud of yourself," he said to Denise, his voice shaking slightly now. "I truly, genuinely hope this was worth it for you. Because what you have done here today, what you have demonstrated, is not brave. It is not honest. It is not good television or good journalism or anything remotely positive. It is just mean. It is just cruel. and I feel sorry for you if this is what you think makes for compelling content." With that, he turned and walked off the set, his footsteps echoing in the silent studio. The camera operators looked at each other, uncertain whether to follow him or stay focused on the panel. One camera did follow him, capturing his straight back, his determined stride as he disappeared into the backstage area. The audience did not know how to react. A few people started clapping, tentatively at first, then more joined in. It was not a standing ovation, not overwhelming applause, but a clear show of support for Hugh. Others sat in stunned silence, their hands in their laps, still processing what they had just witnessed. Nadia Sawalha sank back into her purple chair, putting her head in her hands. "Oh my God," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. "That was absolutely awful. That was one of the worst things I have ever been part of." Kay Adams looked directly at the camera, her professionalism kicking in despite the chaos. "We need to go to a commercial break. Right now. We will be back after these messages." But Denise was still standing, her face flushed red, her arms still crossed defensively over her chest. "He is the one who walked off," she said loudly, her voice echoing in the studio. "He is the one who could not handle a simple conversation. I did nothing wrong." "That was not a simple conversation, Denise," Jane Moore said, her voice shaking with barely controlled anger. "That was a full-on attack. You went way, way too far. That was completely inappropriate." "I was doing my job," Denise insisted, but there was a defensive quality to her voice now. "Your job is to interview guests," Nadia said, looking up, her eyes wet with tears. "Your job is to make them feel welcome, to have interesting conversations, to entertain our viewers. Your job is not to berate people, not to insult them, not to drive them off the set. Hugh Grant is a respected actor, a gentleman. He came here as a favor to promote his film. And you treated him like he was a criminal, like he was on trial." "He was being evasive about his personal life," Denise said, but her voice lacked conviction now. "He was being professional," Kay countered sharply. "He answered questions about his film. He was charming. He was funny. He was giving us great content. And then you started pressing him about his personal life. And when he politely, very politely I might add, asked you to respect his privacy, you attacked him for it. That is not journalism, Denise. That is not what we do here." The floor manager was frantically making cutting motions with his hands, signaling them to wrap it up, to get to the commercial break before this got even worse. "I do not think I did anything wrong," Denise said, though she was looking down now, not meeting anyone's eyes. "I asked tough questions. That is what we are supposed to do." "Tough questions? Yes," Jane said bluntly, her voice hard. "Personal attacks? No. And you know the difference, Denise. I know you know the difference. You crossed a line today. A big one." Off camera, in the control room and the hallways backstage, producers were scrambling frantically. Hugh Grant had not just walked off the set. He had left the building entirely, gotten into his car, and driven away. There would be no coming back from the commercial break with apologies and reconciliation. There would be no salvaging this interview. It was over. Done. Finished. Ended not by a natural conclusion, but by a complete and utter breakdown of basic human respect. Back in the studio, the four women sat in the most awkward silence any of them had ever experienced as the commercial break played. Denise stared straight ahead, her jaw set tight, her arms still crossed. Nadia looked genuinely upset, wiping at her eyes, her mascara starting to run. Jane Moore shook her head slowly, over and over, as if she still could not believe what had just happened. Kay Adams rubbed her temples, her eyes closed, clearly dreading having to come back from commercial and address what had just occurred. A producer came over during the break, whispering urgently to Kay. She nodded, took a deep breath, and prepared herself. When they came back on air, Kay addressed the camera with as much composure as she could muster. Well, and that was certainly unexpected. For those of you just joining us, or those of you who stepped away during the commercial, Hugh Grant has left our studio. He has left the building, and we owe our viewers, and frankly, we owe Hugh, an explanation for what just happened. I asked him perfectly legitimate questions, Denise started, but Kay held up a hand firmly. Denise, not now. We will discuss this later, off camera. This is not the time. Kay turned back to the camera lens. What you just witnessed was a complete breakdown in communication between our panel and our guest. We at Loose Women pride ourselves on having honest, sometimes challenging conversations. We do not shy away from tough topics. But what happened here, what you all just saw, that crossed a line. That went too far. I disagree completely, Denise muttered, but no one acknowledged her this time. Nadia spoke up, her voice thick with emotion, still shaky from crying. I want to personally apologize to Hugh Grant. He came here this afternoon expecting a professional interview about his new film. He deserved to be treated with respect and courtesy. And he did not receive that. He deserved so much better than what happened here today. Jane nodded emphatically. I agree completely with Nadia. There is a huge difference between asking tough, probing questions and making personal attacks. What happened here was the latter. Hugh Grant conducted himself with dignity and grace under extremely difficult circumstances. He only left when the situation became absolutely intolerable. Denise looked at the three of them, her expression somewhere between defiant and uncertain. You are all making me out to be the villain here. All of you. You are ganging up on me. Because you were the villain in this situation, Denise, Jane said simply, bluntly. At least in this instance, in this interview, you absolutely were. Hugh Grant did absolutely nothing wrong. He was polite, he was professional, he was engaging and entertaining. And he only stood up and left when you pushed him past his breaking point, when you insulted him directly. He could not handle the heat, Denise said weakly, trying one last time to defend her actions. No, Kay said firmly, her voice brooking no argument. He could not handle being disrespected, being attacked, being treated poorly, and neither would any of us if we were in his position. If someone spoke to you the way you spoke to him, Denise, you would have walked out too. We all would have. Now, we need to move on. We have other segments planned for today's show, and we need to continue. But the damage was catastrophic, and everyone knew it. The show limped along for the remaining time, but the energy was completely flat, dead in the water. The audience remained subdued, uncomfortable, many of them probably wishing they had not witnessed what they just saw. Denise sat quietly for the rest of the program, her earlier bravado completely gone, replaced with a sullen silence. Nadia kept glancing at her with a complicated mixture of disappointment, concern, and something that might have been anger. Jane Moore looked stony, her usual warmth and friendliness replaced with a cold, professional distance. Kay Adams kept things moving as best she could, but even her considerable professionalism could not hide her frustration and embarrassment. When the show finally, mercifully ended, the panel dispersed immediately. There was no lingering on set, no post-show chat with the audience, no friendly goodbyes and waves. Just a hasty, awkward exit from a studio that had witnessed something none of them had expected or wanted when they had walked in that morning, full of anticipation for a fun interview with a beloved star. The purple chairs sat empty under the bright lights, silent witnesses to a conversation that had spiraled completely out of control. The cameras were switched off one by one. The audience filed out in hushed conversations, many still processing what they had seen. The crew began breaking down equipment, their movements mechanical, their usual banter replaced with heavy silence. What was meant to be a simple promotional appearance had become something else entirely, a moment that would be replayed and analyzed and debated for years to come. A moment when respect broke down completely, when professionalism gave way to confrontation, and when one man decided that enough was truly enough. A moment that nobody would forget.